So now we have an order item. We have an article, which is referenced from the order item. We have a unit of measure, which is referenced from the article. What is missing to build a full mini application, I would say, in the area of order management is the customer. And with the customer, which I will create as next entity, I will also show how to embed an address, which is a one-to-one relationship to an embedded object. But wait for the details. So I create new entity. I name it customer. It is visible in other projects, just as usual. Customer is a text. I create a new one. The ID is ID. ID is the text. Data type. I again choose integer for the key. Here it is. It's the key. And scrolling down, I say it's automatically set by number range. Good. This is the customer. Now I add just a new field, name, oops, and the data type is string 100, mandatory. So let's leave it like this. No further values. Of course, the customer has much more properties, but let's keep it simple at this point of time. Now we want to add an address, and we now could add, of course, street and zip code and city and all the logic here. But of course, address is again an entity which is used by many, many other entities. It could be a customer, a supplier, it could be an organizational unit, it could be a person. So all of these have an address, so it makes sense to have a common address object. Luckily, there is a common address object which you may already use, which comes out of the base project. So if you go into the base project, and there is an address, you see it here, and you see the address is an entity. The ID of the address is a UUID. Yeah, so again, it's a key object. And inside of the address, you see all these things like street, house number, postal code, state, province, country, and whatever. So this is the one we use. So we see the UUID of the address is the one we reference to from the customer. Good. Going back to the customer. So we now say, okay, we create a new property. We call this address ID. The text is address ID. The data type is, we remember, the other one had the data type UUID. So we select this already here so that it matches. And also we say at this point of time, when creating an article, the customer, then this UUID is created. Yeah, so it's at the creation point of time, it is set. Good. Now let's go to embedded entity. Say, okay, we want to embed the address. The entity is the address. Let's see if we find it. Here it is. The type of embedding this time is not a list of objects, because we saw in the address object, there is only one UUID, which is a key. Yeah? So we bind this as object. The property mapping between the customer and the address object is the next thing we define. So in the address, we have this UUID ID, and this is referenced from the address ID of the customer. So that's a relationship. Now, if we scroll down, because it's a one-to-one relationship, we can easily say it's a part of the DB view. So what this means, I will show you in seconds. But remember that I checked this checkbox part of DB view. And I save this. Good. So generate. Deploy. And the system is ready to go. Now, what do we do next? We need to create the customer screens. Let's start with a list. So in the list, we see, as usual, the empty screen, the list without any columns. So we have to drag and drop columns from the left. And now on the left, we see these are the original fields of the customer, and we also see the address field. And that's exactly what I controlled by this checkbox. Normally, you only see the direct properties of the customer. But now I said, okay, in this list, not the entity view is used, the entity is used, but the view is created. you can imagine a join between the customer and the address table, so that this is bound, and this is exactly the one which I can reference in the list of customers. So I now can say I take the ID, the name, I can take the postal code, the street, and I take the city, something like this. I move it over here. It's part of this list now, and the list now contains both data from the customer and data which are joined by this view. Save. Now let's go to the detail. In the detail, we also have an empty screen at the beginning, and usual things. I copy ID name and the address as full object into the screen. Here we are. We now see, okay, these are the fields of the address itself. And for the address, there is a pre-configured screen, which is part of the address definition. And you also see, or what we also see, is that all the logical aspects which are defined with the address also shine through. The postal code is mandatory, the street is mandatory. So if we check, validate the current object, then we not only validate this customer, but we also validate the address below the customer. And the validation rules, which are already defined there, are applied, of course, as sub-validations of the customer. Good. So let's go to the customer list to test the full scenario. We see here the customers, no customer yet defined. We create the first one. The ID is given by the number range. The name is Captain Carter. Yeah. And we now see, okay, we can define hidden limit week house number 13. And the postal code is this one, and the city is this one. And now let's look. If I select country, Germany, then it's fine to save it this way. It's successfully saved. If we now say this is a US customer, then at this point of time, the logic says, oh, I need a state, a province definition here. And we all have some defined, for example, Texas, and now it's valid. So you already see that all the ruling which is inside this, all the business consistency checks are applied as sub-consistency checks of this one. So not only the data is integrated, also the logic is integrated, and of course the UI is integrated. What is the last thing to do? We have our customer workplace, and in the workplace we want to add this so that the customer workplace, the user workplace. And in the user workplace, we remember maybe that there is a tool part, which is edit existing function tree default. And here in this one, we already have the articles, the unit measures, languages. So at this point of time, I now add a new item, which is the customers, create child item. I call it customers. And I create the screen definition. And I say, I want to see the customer list here. I want to allow starting of several of these customer lists. I apply the ID. That's number one. And if we go to the tutorial, to the master data view, and we look into the overview of entities, then we see now the customer points to an address. The address points to a country. The country owns some state provinces. So we have an entity country, which is also to be maintained by the user. So we will add this to the workplace as well. So I go back to the functions definition, and now I also create a new child item to input the countries. So select the screen definition. Here we have the countries. We don't want to allow it several of these ones, so only one is started. I save it. By the way, you can drag and drop these things here. So you could say, okay, that put the country in front of the languages and the customer behind the articles, whatever, and the unit of measures at the very end. So that's the way to go. Save. Now, let's do a last test. Here we are. We restart the workplace. We see the updated workplace with articles, customer, countries. We can maintain the countries. Inside of the countries, we have the definition of the country. We have the customers, which we just saw. So now we have a customer, which has an embedded address, not as an own definition, but as a one-to-one embedding that was taken over from an existing definition.